quarantine curfew in the western province from midnight tonight until the 2nd of November. Health authorities request the public to avoid violating travel restrictions.
සමහර ගම්වල මිනිස්සු ගංගා වලින් එතර වෙලා පැනලා ගිහින් තිබුණා. මූදු මාර්ගයෙන් පැනලා ගිහිල්ලා තිබුණා. විවිධ අතුරු පාරවල් ඔස්සේ පැනලා යනවා.
New Director General of Health Services requests the public to support the fight against COVID-19. Speaker signs blueprint of the 20th Amendment. Government MPs express contradictory views on US State Secretary Mike Pompeo's visit.
නෑ කිසිසේත්ම නෑ මේක ලංකා රජය ආරාධනාවක් නෙවෙයි.
නෑ එහෙම ආව නෙමෙයි. මේ ආවේ අපේ විදේශ කටයුතු අමාත්‍යවරයාගේ ආරාධනයකට ආවේ.
Hello there, very good Thursday evening. This is Prime Time News, comes to you live and direct this evening from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. Bringing the news this evening, I am Joel Outsgood. We start off today with a look at our lead story. The Presidential Task Force to Combat COVID-19 has said that COVID-19 patients have been identified from 28 out of 350 health divisions in the country. Now, during a meeting with the President today, it was revealed that 41,000 individuals are undergoing self-quarantine in a bid to curb the spread of this virus.
The entire supply chain must be subject to constant tests. We saw that several individuals linked to the Palagoda fish market cluster had tested positive for the virus when random tests were carried out. Similarly, tests must be carried out in places in which a supply chain exists, such as the Dambulla Dedicated Economic Centre. In Colombo, tests must be carried out in places such as the fish market. These tests must be carried out randomly. Random tests must be carried out at vegetable distribution points such as PETA as well.
Meanwhile, 2 apps have been launched to disseminate information among all individuals involved in the fight against COVID-19. The app that was launched by the Office of the Western Province Medical Officers of Health in the presence of the President will provide information on several matters including patients, close contacts, the quarantine process and PCR test as well.
Now, the Western Province will come under quarantine curfew from midnight tonight until 5 a.m. on Monday. However, the curfew that has already been imposed in several areas will continue to be in effect until further notice.
Why did we decide to impose quarantine curfew to the entire Western Province? People tend to journey out of Colombo during a long weekend. This situation is quite different to what persisted in April because a rapid increase of COVID-19 patients is being detected. Doctors claim the viral load is high this time around. This is how the pandemic spread across the entire country of China.
How did the public prepare for the curfew?
Long queues were seen outside supermarkets and stores in the Western Province today. This was how the people in several areas conducted themselves by ignoring health directives. Some individuals attempted to leave the Western Province before the curfew.
We believe that a better decision could have been made on technical grounds while following an epidemiological approach to it. If we manage to restrict public movement during the lockdown, we must be capable of managing this situation skillfully. Some residents of those areas have already left the Western Province. We wish to inform those individuals who have left their areas or the Western Province to act responsibly during this period. A question that was asked from us both from the health and public circles is why we pre-announced the curfew. They pointed out that when this takes place, there are more chances for public activity to take place and panic buying, and that it could lead to several issues. As an official attached to the health sector, I admit that this can be disadvantageous to us. I also feel that it would have been appropriate to enforce the curfew in short notice or with immediate effect. However, that is not practical.
Can individuals leave Colombo prior to curfew?
Several people are planning to go out of Colombo due to the long holiday. I feel that must not be done. I also feel that individuals out of Colombo should avoid entering this region as well. The people in some villages had travelled outside their locality by river. They had used various means to escape from the areas. This has become a trend now. Therefore, I feel that despite imposing curfews and travel restrictions, we will not be able to bring this situation under control by enforcing legal measures. We know that sometimes individuals have the chance of moving out of Colombo, but that must be done only for essential reasons and by individuals who cannot avoid avoid making those journeys. However, if the people begin to misuse this opportunity by moving out in large numbers from the Colombo district or the Western province, a massive number of infections will be detected in other parts of the country.
දිවයිනේ විවිධ ප්‍රදේශවලින් මේ රෝගයෙන් හමු වීම සිද්ධ වෙන්න පුළුවන්.
Meanwhile, Nuwara District Secretary Rohana Pushpakumara has informed the public to avoid visiting the Nuwara district until the COVID-19 situation is brought under control.
Quarantine curfew will come into effect to the Western province from midnight tonight. We kindly request people not to travel to Nuwara. It will help us manage this better. Especially during the Diwali festival, if people begin to travel to Nuwara, health authorities will be overwhelmed.
What is the situation in areas that are under curfew?
Stores and pharmacies in areas that are already under curfew have been allowed to remain open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. today. Accordingly, residents of these areas were seen visiting stores to purchase essential items. The Department of Examinations said that the curfew that will be imposed in the Western province with effect from midnight tonight will not apply to GCE advanced level examination candidates. Exams Commissioner General Sanath Pujitha said that the public bus services will operate to transport the students to their exam centres. Meanwhile, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation has also said that 4 stations will be allowed to operate during the curfew. Its chairman Sumit Vijay Singha said that 3 fuel stations in each police jurisdiction will be allowed to remain open during the curfew. The Secretary to the Ministry of Public Administration has issued a circular listing out operation guidelines on maintaining public services during the curfew. The circular states that all state officials must pay attention towards this matter and must remain committed to performing their duties to the fullest.
What is the situation in the expressway?
The travelling of vehicles along the southern expressway has been restricted until further notice. Accordingly, vehicles using the expressway from Kadawatha and Kottawa can travel only until the Valipanna interchange. Police said that vehicles travelling from Mathura and Hambantota on the expressway will not be allowed to enter Colombo. However, this regulation will not apply to any form of essential travel.
What is the situation of train services?
The railway timetable has been amended in keeping with the quarantine curfew that is to be imposed in the Western province from midnight. Issuing a statement, the Department of Railways said that trains operating from Ramukkanna to Colombo Fort, from Beliatha, Gaul, Aluthgama and Kaluthara to Maradana, from Avissawella to Colombo Fort and from Chilaw to Colombo Fort will not be in operation from tomorrow until Sunday. However, the Department of Railways said that a dedicated train service will operate for candidates attempting this year's advanced level examination.
What is the situation in Parliament?
Parliamentary sittings have been limited to 1 day next week due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Accordingly, the next sitting will take place on the 3rd of next month from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The Parliament's Deputy Secretary General Neil Iddawala said that the sittings scheduled on the 4th, 5th and 6th of November have been cancelled. He added that the appropriation bill will be put forward on the 12th of next month, while the budget for 2021 will be put forward by the Finance Minister on the 17th. This decision had been made during today's party leaders' meeting. The new Director General of Health Services, Dr. Asela Gunawardana, assuming duties today, said that the current COVID-19 outbreak will be brought under control soon.
With the support of the Tri-Forces, we will be able to control the situation very quickly. We would like to request the general public to respect the quarantine regulations and travel restrictions. So kindly assist us. We will be able to take the country back to normalcy.
It has been nearly a month since quarantine curfew was imposed in several police jurisdictions in the Gampaha district.
දැන් අරක දෙනවා මේක දෙනවා කියලා කියනවා කිසිම දෙයක් නැහැ පොළොක් ගෙඩියක් තම්බගෙන තමයි ඒක කෑමේදී ඒක නයිටිල් වල දෙන්නේ නැහැ නේ
නෑ කෑ දවල්ට කෑවේ නෑ රෑ කෑ උදේ කෑවේ නෑ සර් ඒ විදිහට හිටියේ එක වේලයිද අනිත් දෙවෙනි හත් දැන් නිකා හිටියේ දාන
මේ 5000 දෙනවා කිව්වා දැන් ඒක තාම නෑ උතම කියන හරි අමාරුවෙන් තමයි ජීවිතය ගෙනියන්නේ කොරෝනා වලට මේ මිනිස්සු මැරෙන ඉස්සරහට කැම්බියෝ මුකුත් නැතුව කියලා වන්දෙන් දවස් කීය ජීවත් වෙන්න පුළුවන් ඔක්කොටම අපේ ව්‍යාපාර අපිට කරගන්න විදියට යන්න සලසලා දෙන්න කියන්න තියෙන ඉතින් කණ්ඩ දෑ මොනවත් නෑ දැන් හයරයක් දුවා ගන්න නෑ අපිට නෑ ආධාර මොනවත් නෑ කො රුපියල් 5000ක් තාම ලැබුණේ නෑ අපිට මෙහෙනම්
අද සිට නිරෝධායනය වෙනවා නම් යම් පවුලක්
If a family is undergoing quarantine, the government will provide hampers worth 10,000 rupees. The government has made arrangements to disburse 2.5 billion rupees to provide these hampers to 484,000 families that have undergone quarantine from the 8th until today. If there is a family that wants to claim this hamper, they can file an appeal with the divisional secretary. The village committee and the divisional secretary will consider this application and serve justice to that family.
News First visited houses in the Grand Pass, Orogodavatta and Kochikade areas in the Colombo district as well. These are the scenes captured by our cameras at a house in Sathamwatta in Orogodavatta. Our reporters learned that the family in that residence does not have sufficient income to afford at least one meal a day.
If there are areas that have been severely affected, we will pay special attention to them. We intend to bring the COVID-19 pandemic under control without inconveniencing the people. The government will remain committed to providing the public with the maximum possible facilities. If there are areas that have been badly affected, we can draw our attention towards them as well.
In related news this evening, the total number of COVID-19 cases across the island exceeded 9,000 today. According to the epidemiology unit of the Ministry of Health, 414 people tested positive for the virus today, increasing the number of COVID-19 positive cases to 9,619. Now 5,458 people are still being treated for the virus in hospitals. The epidemiology unit further said that 4,142 people have completely recovered and were discharged from hospitals. The number of COVID-19 deaths in the country stands at 19. Speaker of Parliament Mahindayapa Abewardena assented the bill entitled 20th Amendment to the Constitution at his office today. The signing took place in the presence of Secretary General of Parliament and Deputy Secretary General of Parliament. Neil Idewala, the Chief of Staff and Deputy Secretary General of Parliament, said it becomes the law of the country from the moment. Therefore, the existence of the Constitutional Council is abolished forthwith and all provisions of the Act law are now in operation.
Chief Opposition Whip Lakshman Kiriyalla has informed the Speaker of Parliament to assign seats in the ruling faction for 9 MPs who were expelled from the Samagi Jana Balavegaya for supporting the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. The 9 MPs are Nationalist MP Diana Gamage, Badulla District MP A. Aravind Kumar, Anuradhapura District MP Ishaq Rahman, Diga Madulla MP Faisal Qasim, Diga Madulla MP HMM Haris, Anuradhapura District MP MS Tawfiq, Batikalo District MP Nasir Ahmed, Putlam District MP Ali Sabri Rahim and Diga Madulla MP SMM Musharraf. The Tamil Progressive Alliance convened a media briefing today.
150
parliamentarians signed a petition requesting a pardon for parliamentarian Duminda Silva. I signed the petition. Rather than calling for Duminda Silva's release, I wanted to use this publicity to draw attention on Tamil political prisoners who have been in jail for 10, 15, 20 and 25 years. I believe that the Tamils and the Muslims in the country will be able to find a solution to their problems only if they are understood by the Sinhalese. Taking these matters into consideration, I withdrew my signature from the petition calling for the release of Duminda Silva.
Now, various views are being expressed on the US State Secretary Mike Pompeo's visit to Sri Lanka. These were some of the views expressed by Minister Viravansa in this regard today.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had the backbone to say that he will not betray the country's sovereignty or independent nature to maintain diplomatic relations. We did not panic over this visit since we knew that this topic would make the rounds only until Pompeo visits and leaves the country. The influence exerted by the US State Secretary towards India to enter into agreements was not exerted on us. Therefore, we did not panic when we heard of Pompeo's arrival. When this matter emerged at the cabinet meeting a day before the visit, the president clearly stated that matters surrounding the MCC would not be discussed during his visit. We wish to clearly state that the MCC agreement will not be signed by our government. We will not be a part of a government that supports such agreements as well.
Mike Pompeo, Rajalekamvaraya, Videsh Amatyavaraya Samaga.
The remarks made by the US State Secretary Mike Pompeo during the joint media briefing alone creates an element of fear. He called on the country to keep naval routes open, that is to allow military vessels to pass through these regions. He also spoke about the military cooperation. What does military cooperation mean? Will the military cooperation between the two sides pave the way for acquiring our assets and obtaining our services? He spoke about the joint exercises as well. Yesterday, the State Secretary said that an agreement is being drafted by the US Embassy in Colombo and that it is in the final phase of being prepared. He claimed that once the agreement is signed, it would strengthen ties between the US and Colombo. What is this agreement? We are not aware of such an agreement. As far as we know, even the cabinet and parliament are not aware of this. He clearly said that Sri Lanka cannot work with both China and the US and called on the country to pick sides. Pompeo visited the country to force Sri Lanka to align with one side. When Dean Thompson expressed remarks to that effect, Muralitharan said that the visit was not to pressurize Sri Lanka. Are we to believe Dean Thompson or Muralitharan? We don't have personal issues with the US. We only challenge the clauses in the agreement that are detrimental to the country. Although they have proposed to offer us a grant under the MCC agreement and to hold discussions, it doesn't mean that projects that threaten national security were proposed by our government. If someone is saying that it happened, it is a lie. What's important is not the name of the agreement, but whether it is harmful to the country or not. We will oppose it if there is any clause that is harmful to the country.
A meeting called Quad is taking place involving the US, India, Australia and Japan. On the other hand, China's influence is growing. We are trapped in the middle. It is easy to scold the US and say that its soldiers can enter the country and abuse our women. It is easier to make such remarks and to say that a protective fence must be built around the country. The people applaud such individuals, cheer them, welcome them with garlands and light firecrackers. However, the country cannot be governed in such a manner. What will happen to us when we heap praise on one country and criticize another? Ultimately, our country will be affected badly. When China was accused of being a predator, it hit back less than 45 minutes after the criticism was leveled. This confrontation is taking place in Sri Lanka. They are trading blows on our land. They are using electronic modes to do that. Do not allow this problem to aggravate. Rifts that begin with tweets may worsen in the future. We do not want to see ourselves being trapped by submarines and military vessels cornering us from both sides. Do not push the country to such a situation.
We are willing to be held accountable for the people. We stand to protect the sovereignty of the country. The President directly said that we will not compromise the sovereignty or the territorial integrity of the nation. When a state leader arrives, both parties issue a joint statement. That is the procedure. No clandestine agreements are struck. We will not practice the act of striking secret deals unlike the previous government. What we are stating is the truth.
Now, how did the US State Secretary's visit to Sri Lanka take place? Two ministers from the ruling faction provided controversial answers to this query.
No, certainly not. This is not an invitation extended by the Sri Lankan government. It was a tour he made to many countries. When our government was informed of his arrival, which included India and Maldives, we did not refuse. No, he did not come like that. His arrival happened after an invitation was extended by the Ministry of Foreign Relations. No, Minister Dinesh Gunawardena informed us at a cabinet meeting that an invitation was extended since he was visiting India. It was a friendly invitation. That's what we were told.
In related news this evening, US State Secretary Mike Pompeo ended his visits to the Maldives and Indonesia and is due to hold bilateral discussions in Vietnam. The State Secretary reiterated US's interest in a free and open Indo-Pacific region and continued their criticism of Chinese activities in the region.
Secretary Pompeo travelled to Mali to reaffirm close bilateral relations and advance partnerships on issues ranging from regional maritime security to the fight against terrorism. The State Secretary expressed the United States' intention to open an embassy in Maldives with a resident US ambassador, reflecting the continued growth of the US-Maldives relationship and underscoring the United States' unshakable commitment to Maldives and the Indo-Pacific region.
Issues about security in the Maldives and other island nations I've been to, like Micronesia and Sri Lanka, have taken on new importance as the Chinese Communist Party continues its lawless and threatening behavior. We see that behavior in the PLA's illegal militarization of South China Sea. We see it in encroachments into its neighbors' economic zones.
The US State Secretary then travelled to Jakarta for talks with his Indonesian counterparts to affirm the two countries' vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. The US State Secretary said that he believes respect for human rights is critical for democratic governance and that democracies such as Indonesia are stronger when they uphold the law.
In a recent report, the investment bank Goldman Sachs said Sri Lanka has been included among several countries that have a relatively high probability of prolonged debt distress and debt default. Economists point out that such a downgrade will further exacerbate Sri Lanka's aligned economy and urge the government to improve its debt sustainability.
According to Goldman Sachs analysts, sovereign default risks are on course to rise further in 2021, with Iraq, Sri Lanka, Angola and Gabon at high probability of default. The report added that recent defaulters, Ecuador, Argentina and Lebanon, were also among those with high probabilities of distress.
Debt distress simply means that there's a lot of debt overhang, which implies that when you look at metrics like debt to GDP, that metric is extremely high. Most analysts have projected that by the end of this year, our metric will be around 95 to 100%. So that would kind of signify debt distress. In terms of debt default, that is precipitated by a credit event. So any kind of change in the credit agreement in terms of the timing of when you're going to make the payment would be categorized as a debt default.
In response to the downgrade, State Minister of Money and Capital Market and State Enterprise Reforms, Ajit Niwad Cabral, speaking to Newsfirst, said the Goldman Sachs report is completely misplaced. He said Sri Lanka has sufficient reserves and the government has presented a clear plan on how to settle the debt. He added that Sri Lanka is well on top of the case, although there are certain stretchers, and requested investors to remain calm while assuring that investors will be protected. Meanwhile, the Department of Census and Statistics said releasing Sri Lanka's economic growth rates for the second and third quarters are likely to be delayed further. The gross domestic product rates for both quarters will be released on the 15th of December. However, it is likely to change due to COVID-19. Meanwhile, Reuters reported that Sri Lanka's dollar-denominated government bonds fell heavily yesterday as the United States ratcheted up presence on Sri Lanka's government over its ties with China. Sri Lanka's dollar-denominated bonds have seen a 40% loss of their face value this year. By yesterday, the annual interest of the international sovereign bond which Sri Lanka is supposed to pay was at 46%. This has never happened. If one can recall, Greece was a country which had to pay such high interests. Even Sri Lanka invested in Greek bonds. What happened in the end? Millions of dollars were squandered because the Greek government was unable to pay them. I will not draw comparisons between Sri Lanka and Greece, but lenders' confidence in Sri Lanka has plummeted greatly. There are several factors behind this. The issue aggravated further due to COVID-19. However, certain ad hoc decisions made by the government in December with the intention of winning elections took a huge hit on the economy. The friction between China and the United States is intensifying day by day. Over the next 5 years, we need to pay $25 billion worth of debt. Our dollar income has dipped greatly and we are unable to obtain more debt. Let's assume we are able to pay off the debt that is due to be paid by June. What will happen next? The government needs to commence talks with the IMF.
if this international debt servicing becomes a problem, there's a higher chance that will also come to the domestic debt. And if you look at the domestic debt portfolio, about 35% of our domestic debt is being on the treasury bonds, and out of the treasury bonds, the main investor on treasury bonds are our EPF and ETF, that is about 35% of that portfolio. And also there's another 10% share for the commercial banks. That means commercial banks and EPF and ETF has invested their money on treasury bonds. And if there's a challenge on debt servicing, if it comes to the domestic debt instruments, of course, people who have invested their money in EPF and ETF, as well as the commercial banks, will also have to bear the risk. The impact for the common man would be that their property value will go down, and at the same time, there's a higher chance the quality of life will be somewhat diminished.
Since you have an external debt crisis, there will be a scarcity of dollars. And if we are not going to go in for a reprofiling, then we will have to ration whatever dollars we have in the economy, which will increase the price of a dollar. So invariably there will be a further depreciation of the currency, which means that price of imported products will go up. Second is that you will have to forego certain types of consumption. Third is that a lot of trade will get affected because the banks drive trade, and there will be a lot of international banks who will not want to trade with Sri Lanka, which will drive up the cost of financing. Finally, we'll end up in terms of higher inflation. That itself will go against growth. There will be less jobs and salary increases will be less, and businesses will go bankrupt. So this is a scenario that we should avoid at all costs. You have to make the markets believe that you're good for the money. Secondly, that you have to take concrete steps to improve your solvency through tax revenues. The most important factor is that you have to grow the economy faster, and we have to put in kind of growth enhancing policies that hopefully will get our economy to grow again at about 5%. Although we may have to take some short-term action, in the long term we may be able to glide through this crisis.
In a very interesting note, Sri Lanka is considering introducing house arrest after prisons exceeded their capacity by 184.6% last year.
The overpopulation of prisons was at its highest in at least 2 decades according to available data, and has caused depression among inmates and affected rehabilitation. Based on the percentage, the country's prison institutions that can hold 11,762 prisoners had around 33,470 prisoners by December last year. The Prisons Department identified unnecessary remand population as one of the reasons for overcrowding in prisons, and said that only 1 in 4 inmates are convicted. It also cited the increase in individuals imprisoned for drug-related offences as a reason for this problem. The department said that 46.4% of convicted prisoners are serving time for dangerous drug offences and 62.4% for drug-related offences. To resolve this problem, the Prisons Authority is planning to pump 19.2 billion rupees to relocate and expand prisons, and also to construct a drug rehabilitation centre. The relocation of the Velikada Closed Prison, Colombo Remand Prison, New Magazine Prison and the prisons in Bogambara, Trincomalee and Mathura are to take place in the coming years. The money is also to be used to construct a new drug rehabilitation centre at Veeravilla. As a solution, the department is also considering early release schemes and removing certain clauses in the criminal law.
The Anglican Church of Sri Lanka was bestowed with a new bishop for the Diocese of Colombo. Right Reverend Father Dushantha Lakshman Rodrigo was appointed as the 16th Bishop of Colombo.
The decision to appoint him to this high office in the episcopate was made by His Grace Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in his capacity as the Metropolitan of the Church of Ceylon. The episcopal ordination and installation of Right Reverend Dushantha Lakshman Rodrigo as the 16th Bishop of the Diocese of Colombo, Church of Ceylon, took place yesterday at the Cathedral of Christ the Living Saviour, Colombo. Father Dushanta Rodrigo becomes the first Thomian to take on the mantle of Bishop of Colombo. Ever since Right Reverend James Chapman, the pioneer clergyman who sailed to Ceylon, set up the Anglican churches and schools such as St. Thomas's College, there were no bishops from St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia. His first posting was to the hill country at Holy Trinity Church, Nuwara and Christ Church, Ragala. His ministry knowledge was further augmented with a Bachelor of Divinity degree from the Senate of Serampore, India. Recognizing the potential of his dynamic young priest, he was posted as the chaplain of St. Thomas's College, Gurutalava. Over the next few years, he served as curate and vicar of many churches, including a stint in Mathura.
And our chief pastor for the laying of hands and...
Former Sri Lankan cricketer Muralitharan says a planned film about his life will be released despite a massive backlash in South India, which caused the lead actor to quit.
In an interview with the BBC, the cricketing great had said that he has got through many hurdles in life. The controversy surrounding the movie 800, a reference to his record-breaking 800 Test match wickets, was met with a massive outpouring of anger when a film poster featuring popular South Indian actor Vijay Sethupathi in the lead role was released. Muralitharan has further said, quote, "I meant that after 2009 we had peace in this country. For me, when the war finished, it was the happiest day of my life because peace came, not because Tamil civilians were killed," unquote. Andrew Fidel Fernando, a cricket writer in Colombo who has written extensively about Muralitharan's cricketing reign, has said, quote, "I would have loved to see a film about him, not glorifying him, but something which brings all aspects of his complex identity to the screen," unquote. The former Sri Lankan cricketer told BBC, quote, "It will be made. The film's not just for Tamil Nadu. The producers are from Mumbai. They want it in all languages, in Tamil, Sinhala, Hindi, Bengali, Telugu, Malayalam and with English subtitles," unquote. The cricketing great added, quote, "People in India don't know what's happening in Sri Lanka," unquote. Speaking on the backlash actor Vijay Sethupathi has received for portraying him, Muralitharan has said, quote, "This is my battle, not his battle, so I will take on the battle," unquote. He has further said, quote, "People in Tamil Nadu take cinema very seriously. A movie is not just a movie there. Tamil cinema and politics are interrelated," unquote.
With that, we wrap this edition of Primetime News. Thank you very much for stopping by. More news follows on our website, that is www.newsfirst.lk. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Joel Outsgood. Remember to stay safe and take care. Good night.